and I think we're live. So you're good.
Right.
Thank you.
We will now turn the time over to Superintendent Cabista for a continued bond discussion.
Yes, so as directed by the board, we have a couple things for you today and actually got pricing today, which I'm going to talk about second. So one of the things, just based as we were coming off of our November process of going out for a bond, one of the requests from the board was to, especially for Monmouth Elementary, to move forward with some rendering looks of what that school would look like actually on the site. So behind me, I just want to show you Brick Architecture, who we have worked with in the past. They were the original architectures that helped us with the facility assessment and then the facility, I'm blanking on the committee, no, the facility committee, specifically looking at what might we go forward with in a bond. So up here, what I just want to show you is this is actually a layout of what would be new Monmouth Elementary School on the current property that it is on. So I'll just give you an idea of just where things are. So I call that orange dotted line is really where all the buildings are of the current facility of Monmouth. And then really right here is parking lots and playground. You got a playground on the back over there, and where the new building is the field. If you think of Monmouth over here, this is where the dog park area is, just to give you a reference. So again, still having only the entrance at Church Street, looks a little bit different. One of the things we talked about with them is making sure one of the issues at Monmouth right now is just people in and out with buses and cars. So you'll see, we had that conversation with them. So again, a specific bus loop and a specific parent loop. So it separates those out. And then you have on the far right there in the yellow would be the actual building. I would say it's both 1 and 2 stories. We're going to show you a couple other just quick renderings. You see a covered play area up on that side, an accessible play area, because again, with our students experiencing disability, we're trying to expand what playable areas look like for everyone and that we're inclusive. And then some soft play areas. And then where the current school is listed, potentially additional play fields. Again, full soccer, I would say a small, this is probably more of a peewee baseball type of field, not a full baseball / softball field, but that would give you really what that would look like on site from that perspective. If we go to the next slide, it just shows an example of what the front would look like. Sort of does. There's some things I'm sure they're rendering things that look very similar to what we have built. So again, inside of that, or again, this would be sort of where that bus loop is coming into the main entrance. A lot of schools now do have some covered areas because obviously if it's raining.
Right.
It's a place for
great.
Kids to stand, keep them underneath cover. Sort of a modified version of the breezeways, but not having breezeways because everything would be inside. So that's the front entrance. And then the other one they just gave us an example would be an actual cafeteria, separate from the gym from that perspective. So that just, again, is a couple of different examples of just what this might look like. Obviously, this is really the big piece of that we wanted to share with you. The other thing that we got today was cost. So originally when we were with Brick and we listed out several different projects, they gave us a ballpark of how much an elementary school would be. This is actually specifically what this building potentially could cost. So you're going to see once Emily passes them out here, what I'm going to say is I'll walk you through it just so you know. It's hard to get on one page. So the normal, costs for just demolition and hazmat, you're looking at about $1.7 million. So again, I'm just going to go from top left, and you'll see costs, that's sort of that middle column. And then you've got, so there's cost, and then you've got low range and high range.
What's the current capacity of MES? Because this says capacity for this is 628.
Yes, the current capacity of MES is technically 500.
Okay.
It's not very big. So we originally had, when we went out, because we were looking a little bit more of potentially having a larger K-8 because of our special education. There's a little bit still of that in here, but that was sized down a little bit. So we took the size down instead of going with 700 to go about 628, because it ranges in those anywhere between, you can have a elementary school 500 to as big as 1,000. We don't obviously have the space for that. Because this is small acreage.
But is it 628 if you don't have increased spaces for sped? Or is it 628 with a percentage
We
that's
have
sped?
specific special education.
I can see
sites
that
in
on
there.
here. I just wasn't sure if the space available per student, like, because that's what I'm thinking about is the
It's
space.
an average.
It's an average.
It's an
okay.
average, yeah. So the new building costs, again, just a K-5 academics, you'll see second, the sped K-8, a music, a library, a cafeteria, athletics PE, which is a gym area, covered play, obviously administrative counseling offices, community and special use, because that's just a small area, because that's a big thing, obviously custodial maintenance. So you're looking, and let me go back, the cost in the middle is the average cost. To the right of that, you're gonna see a low range, which they're saying, hey, if you come under some costs of a building are going down, so it gives you a range of this is what could be minus 10%, and then you have a high range, which is plus 10%. So that just gives you that range. So just the new building itself is, again, 32 million, a little bit, almost 33 million. And then just, basic things, site, fencing, play fields, parking lots, pedestrian paving, playgrounds. That's the rest of the bike parking, because all that's now built into new schools. And then obviously any type of furnishings and signage, landscaping, irrigation, all of those pieces. So again, if you keep going down, plus all I call it the contingency funds that are there on the low end, you've got all the construction costs. And then you go farther down, just the other soft costs and just different things. It's the cost they're averaging it is about 66 million. On the low end, 59.5, 59 million. And then on the high end, 72. So again, we just wanted to share that with you. So it's gonna, fall into that similar range as we had said before, between 60-ish million.
And does
per
this
month.
include the automatic locking doors that we
Yeah,
talked
all
about?
that would be top line.
All of the security,
Yeah,
like
it would be
cameras, all that stuff
correct.
even?
Yeah, that really comes with
Mhm.
the newly furnished schools. It's sort of the standard.
Let's do it.
So again,
You got your checkbook
as
done?
requested by the board, we just wanted to give you this information as we continue this conversation. Obviously, we're not moving forward, just so the board knows, we did turn back the Awesome Grant. We did that because if we choose to go out again, possibly in November or next May, we want to have that option out, so we turn that money back. So we'd still be eligible for it in the fall/next spring, if needed. So we just, like I said, we wanted to bring this to your attention and.
What does this mean down here? Escalation to start of construction spring 27.
Because that's when they would estimate when construction would begin,
Begin,
potentially
if we
depending
went
on
in
when.
November?
I think,
Or if
either
we went
way.
in May?
because it could be a little bit earlier in November, but that's usually, it takes a little bit of time to get everything in order to start then the construction process.
And then still, how long? But I forget what you said, how long to
Usually it
build.
takes a year. You could do it in a little bit less time, but because this is, I think the hard part I want to remind everybody is that there's a potential we are building on site while school is still going.
Yeah, this
Right.
is still there.
Yeah,
Okay.
so the school's
So
right,
they
the
don't
school,
demolish the old school
Again,
until.
Until
an
it's done.
example,
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
you know, current schools
Gotcha.
existing, what potentially they would do is, to be very honest, probably, and again, this is just for my historic from working in another school district, potentially they're gonna do this first, build, move
Then.
kids in, finish this side.
Smart, okay.
So, right, that could take a year process, as an example,
Mhm.
from
That
from
makes
beginning
sense.
to end.
That makes sense.
Other questions about this as we continue this conversation?
I guess my first thought is, and this is maybe Susan or anybody else is familiar with the facility committee work, is if we were to decide to go out tomorrow, is this enough information to focus people on MES and what we're actually going to do? Or do we need to have,
I mean, not that, but that combined with something like this, where you know that they're gonna put a gym and they're gonna put a music room and they're gonna, like all of those things, this you can't really tell. Like when I was first looking at it, I was like, well, where's the gym then? Because you can't,
this is just
Really?
square feet.
yeah, this is just a kind of a rough, so we have
And
something to
can-
work
They
with.
can do a rendering inside,
Uh-huh.
again, that's just an additional cost, we can continue to go down that pathway. But this is a first step just based off of, you know, just some information that you requested.
Is this one story, two story?
It's sort of I'm gonna say it's a combo, right, like some
Can
areas.
you go back to that next slide? Because you can see
Yeah.
it's 2 stories.
So just
on the right
their rendering
there,
looks
but
a
not-
little bit like there could be 2 stories, again, if you're seeing here,
Some of
just
that's
as an
probably
example.
just-
up top
Yeah,
here, the
right.
windows,
That's what
right,
I
this
think.
could be I'm making this up, that could be the cafeteria area. So there is,
More like vaulted ceiling.
yeah. And you're
Like you
gonna
need for the
potentially with
gym.
like a special education wing, that would be all on possibly 1 floor. So there could be, again, I'm gonna go back a little bit.
What, that other window looked like a 2-story
To the
thing?
right.
That just
Correct.
like
To
an
the right,
atrium kind of
Correct.
thing?
Correct, yeah. So again, you're looking at things like if this is the main entry, I mean, this could be, again, I'm making this up, 2 stories, 2-story. Maybe this section is more of a 1-story if that's a special education wing where we're trying to expand more of that there, again, as an example. So we can talk with them if you'd like I want to be careful because I think the struggle, prior bonds in 2016, you all gave them pretty good examples of facilities. This time we did not. When we did it last time, the community said, oh, look, see, the school district already built it and, you know, we're not getting any say. This time we tried to go that route. We got, hey, we would like to look at a visual of that. So I think we're just trying to find the middle ground to give what the community is wanting to see from this building.
The priority items from the facilities plan for MES are like not having cafegimatorium anymore. So that's that. Air conditioning, you know, better the playground situation, like all the things that I can remember off the top of my head, I'm seeing in here. I mean, can we keep these or do we have to give these back?
No, I mean, we're gonna put these, this is
Okay.
now a
'Cause
public document. so
I'll go
we'll-
back and look.
Yeah.
And make sure, but I think this is addressing all the things that were identified in the facilities plan specifically for MES. And we weren't too far off in what we were guesstimating before.
We'll still need at 99 because we have other things to do.
Right.
besides MES.
Again, I think that's a continued conversation. So, like I said, we just wanted to bring this to you as sort of a next step and sort of that due diligence as we move forward with this conversation. Okay?
Any other questions or discussion on that topic?
I'm just thinking, when our bond passes, Corvallis just built to use elementary schools, and we could probably do tours of those,
Yes.
before deciding what we really want.
Mhm.
All right, budget update.
Yeah, so I want to give you, and it's sort of a budget / legislation, because I think all of this is going to tie together as we move forward. And a couple things I want to just remind the board is we are now really about a month into legislation. So I'm going to just say it's a marathon, not a sprint, but it is going fast already. We do have 4 areas that we are focusing on. Again, those are support for all students. So that is every student. That includes the additional supports for students experiencing disabilities, counseling, psychologists, SLPs, really making sure that we have what we need for all of our students. A stable state school funding model, which obviously deals with our current service level, as well as additional special education funding for that. Again, to make sure we're not doing unfunded mandates, which we're going to talk about in a couple of the bills that I'm concerned about, that we just need to pay attention to. And then obviously tied to this is potentially how do we deal with failing public facilities. So there's not much on that yet, so I'll just say I'm going to focus on the first 3. I have not seen a legislative template yet for one of the public facilities at this point. The other thing I will reference is that any legislative bill that has a fiscal impact, not only it's going to first go through the Revenue Committee and then it goes to the Ways and Means. So again, every bill that we talk about where there's potential funding will go through 2 additional committees before we even get to a final piece of that. So questions about any of that, just as a starting point, working through this. Okay, so I've given you a couple bills. I'm going to go over a couple and then I will highlight, and then I'm going to drop this into the Friday report this week. So I've talked to you already about the current service level, which is House Bill 2140. That is the beginning part or start of the process. I think the really important part about this is it really modifies the method of which the administrative services and fiscal office project costs. So that is a good thing. I think you're going to see, and I'll talk about this, we have 2 more revenue forecasts coming out for the state. So one will be at the end of this month, and then next one will be in May. I do not believe we're going to have any real number of what the state school fund will be until late May, which is going to be just a hard process for us with the budget committee. And we'll talk further about that moving forward, but I just, again, want to make the board aware of that. So it talks about how they really choose what our state school fund number, the current service level would look like. It adds in language. You've heard Cece and I talk about this. Sometimes they want to split the biennium 50-50. We don't like that because we would like a little bit more cushion going into the second year of the biennium. So that this House bill giving the new formula, but also saying your first year you get 49% of your budget and the second year you get 51%, right? That gives us a little bit more flexibility. 50-50 can be hard, especially if you don't spend it all. So there's a little bit of that from that. So that is a good thing. So that's just the current service level. The next 2 bills are out of the House and both deal with special education. You've seen a couple of the things that I've sent you in the Friday reports. We've got unprecedented collaboration between OEA, OSEA, COSA, Oregon School Board Association, Disabilities Rights, Facts Oregon, right? All of those who have not really always been together have really pushed forth and said, we really need to focus on special education and the funding. So there's 2 bills. One that's tied to high cost disability, which is House Bill 2448. And the other one deals with the percentage cap, which is House Bill 2953. So what they're both saying is that this would be money that would go into the high cost disability account from the state school fund. Now here's where it gets tricky. We have to watch to make sure that if the state school fund is starting at 11.36, we don't want them to carve out. We need them to put in. So if they're going to have our high cost disability potentially at, and I'm making this up because we don't know the number yet, 100 million, then we should be moving to 11.46. Not staying at 11.36 and carving that out. So again, there's two bills that are on the floor, again, beginning stages, House Bill 2448 and House Bill 2953, both dealing with high cost and cap. I do not believe there's going to be enough money to fully fund both. So I think the strategy is going to be, okay, how much do they want to raise the high cost? Either they're going to potentially fund one, or they're going to partially fund both, or, a combination of that. Or they can fund one and they can partially fund one for this biennium. So I'll give an example. Our high cap, right now we have almost 15% of our kids with experiencing disabilities. We only get reimbursed 11%. I'd be happy if they came back and said, for the next biennium, the goal is to get us to 13% the first year and 15% the next year, right? It's a pathway forward that we're getting additional money. And oh, by the way, we're gonna give you 90 cents on the dollar for high cost. Right now we get 40 cents on the dollar. So I think we could see a combination of those things tied to that. But then again, I'm gonna go back to, if they're saying high cost is gonna be 100 million, then our state school fund should move to 11.46, not carve out from 11.36. Makes sense from that perspective. So we'll need to watch that. Again, I get what OSBA sends you. I'm not always reading it because I'm getting a lot of my information from COSA. So if there is something in there that you see and potentially I miss, I want to make sure that you have this information, so we're asking the right questions.
So the 11% is the cap of what they'll reimburse us?
Right now,
Currently, yeah.
So.
said in
they introduced-
1998.
They introduced a bill today to eliminate the cap.
Yes, they both eliminate the cap and pay for full high cost disability. I want to be clear, it's in the beginning stages of the bill, so the bill is very small. There could be other things that go into that. Julie, would you like to add something?
I just want to put in clarification. Do they say they're eliminating the cap or they're going to increase the cap?
They actually, the way it's written right now, it says, and this is from the actual bill because I put it in my notes, removes the percentage cap on the amount of monies that are distributed from the state school fund to school districts for students eligible for special education as a child with disabilities. And then they declare it as an emergency, so then the funding would start July 1.
So the problem with that is that there are some districts that have like a 20-25%.
Right.
Understand?
Yeah, so I'm just.
Yeah. I do not believe unless the economist comes back in the end of this month and says, hey, we're doing great. I don't know that that's going to be this time, the model has changed. So this will be the first time since the model's changed. We'll see what he comes out with again in February and then what that looks like in May.
But if they pull it from the general fund, it doesn't matter anyway, because you're just robbing Peter to pay.
Correct, that's what we want to pay attention to,
Right.
right? We cannot have them saying, yeah, we're gonna give you 11.36, but we're carving out 100 million to put in a high cost disability, so that then only the state school funds
It's not an
11.26.
improvement.
We don't want that. We'd rather stay at 11.36 and let's figure out what's a pathway to get us to fully funding special education.
You're still at the situation where even if it's fully funded, you still have to find staff to
Correct,
fill those.
correct. But that could help. I think there's some recruiting strategies and things that we could do, but yes, I still think that's gonna be a big part of our conversation. Okay, so that's mostly the state school fund, right? So those are the big buckets there. The other one that I've shared with you is PERS. So there's a Senate Bill 849. And really what this is looking at doing is there was some savings that they had for our unfunded liability, a couple $100 million, a little under $200 million. With that savings, potentially it could give us back with this bill 1.6 percentage points off our 25-27 rates. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but any amount counts because our rates are gonna go up astronomically. We will show you that when we get to the budget committee, and we may start to talk about that a little bit more, but PERS fees are gonna go up. One of the conversations they've had, because part of the unfunded, and I don't know our number off the top, I didn't pull it before this meeting, you know, the costs that we're dealing, some school districts are having huge costs in the next 2 years. We have costs, but not to that. There was some thought that they would give that money to the school districts that have the higher costs. Most school districts have said, no, you need to be equitable across the state. And just, so that's why we get to the 1.6 percentage points that would be then put towards our unfunded liability for the 25-27 period. So it'd bring our rates down a little bit. Not a ton, but a little bit. We think that's a good approach. And I'll just keep you aware of that because PERS is always a big conversation. So questions about PERS? Just one of my favorite topics. The second one, and I'm going a little bit into more, I'm going to say on the instruction side and just our outcomes. So I've shared with you a little bit about, there is a bill, Senate Bill 149 tied to accountability. I think one of the things is we are ahead and we're already doing this. So kudos to all of you as we adopted a strategic plan, as we have long-term performance metrics, because what we're hearing is that this will come into play and you'll have to report on it, which we already do. We've been doing that now for 4 years, 5 years now, pretty consistently. So they'll still do the 5 identified that we already have. 4-year cohort graduation, 5-year completer, attendance, 9th grade on track, 3rd grade English language arts, and math proficiency. So those areas which we already have as part of our longitudinal because we saw this coming and we just said to the community, hey, we think this is good. Community did not disagree and we adopted that. What they're also looking at targeting is K-2 attendance, which we already track, which our schools are already looking at. So that would not be anything that would potentially having us have a conversation about our strategic plan, maybe shifting a couple of our longitudinal goals. We're gonna have to have that conversation anyways next year because we do need to look at, is there anything we wanna change in our strategic plan? Because really it closes out technically in 2027. So that sort of, we already have built, so that's a good thing. The other one is they're also looking at 8th grade math. We have built an 8th grade. We have 3rd, 6th, and 8th grade metrics that we have built in outside of what is needed for the state. So some of this is not going to be very difficult for us to do. And then there's one other local metric that will be picked, but will have to be from the potential list. So I think it's going to be something like ELPA. We already collect that. It could be culture and climate surveys. We already are doing that. We are in our 2nd year of doing, we just finished our district services survey and we will next do our staff survey, then go into our students and our families. So again, I think that's going to be the mix, but we have most of this already in place. So this does not bother me. My colleagues are not the same. I think we've done a really good job as a district in building our accountability. So it's one of those, I'm okay if it passes because we're already doing it. So questions about that? And please press on me if you think I need to share differently, but I'm not worried about this one right now because we're already doing it.
Are they gonna be tying performance to reimbursements or?
Oh, that would be so great.
do with
No.
their-
Well, I can't say that. I think this is a beginning first step of accountability. And then I think from there, part of the conversation they are saying is, because we have longitudinal with the state, I've shared that, I think it was 2 meetings ago, that we're meeting most of our benchmarks. I put it in a Friday report. I think there's only one benchmark, really our high school is still the benchmark we're not meeting. And we know that will come with the work we are doing K-12. However, there is funding sometimes tied, and so they've talked about if schools aren't making progress in their data, will the state come in and direct you where your money needs to go. Now, we reminded them, you need to have people that understand transformational work in a school district, that have done the work, that have been able to take a low-performing school and shift it. Because if you just hire people to say, where are you gonna put your money, that's not gonna be helpful for us. We have lots of conversations as staff with our union leadership groups, right? We're having conversations about trainings and different things like that. So that there is a piece of that we're a little bit concerned on who's going to come in and tell us what to do, and they better have the background if you're going to put this in law.
That sounds like shades of No Child Left Behind.
Correct. I would not disagree with that. Yeah. So there's there's been some pushback in that area.
If they come to our district, I sure love to
Um,
talk a little bit about.
We are making, so here's what I will tell you,
research, know?
we are making progress.
Oh, I know we are.
So I don't think they would come to us at this moment in time, based off of what we're doing. We would not be part of that conversation. I think they would be pressing us on, what are you doing to improve your high school? Or what are you doing at the middle school if we had a metric, but
And what's
Because
the
of-
poverty rate in your district and.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would volunteer to be part of that. We need someone to.
yeah, so I'll just keep you informed about that. And then three other ones, just so you know, I shared with you the attendance last week, the bills that are coming through attendance. We knew this was coming, but one of the things that we shared last week is, again, this is unfunded mandate. So one of those, the first one, I'll just give an example, is the attendance advisory committee. So every district potentially would have to have I call it the old truancy board, for those of you that have been around in this education world, where we're hiring people. It could be a mix of staff, it could be community members, or we have this board that hears and tries to help with attendance. That's cost of time, that's food, that's how are we getting families here. So we were very clear with them, fine, if you're gonna do an attendance advisory, put a fiscal impact on there of what it's gonna cost schools, because that is a unfunded mandate. Again, going to accountability, there's a quarterly data, we're already doing that, not a big deal, we'd be able to pull that and give it to them. I think one of the key things that I'm excited about, common codes, that has been one of the things since being in this state. We have excused and unexcused, that's it. But it doesn't direct us on, so if they're gone for a doctor's appointment, is that excused, is that unexcused? So it give us a little bit more definition to help with our reporting. That may seem like a really small thing, it would be huge to have that, to make it easier for us to code and make sure our attendance is appropriate.
Well, and plus making sure districts are reporting the same.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're going to compare them.
Yes, yes. And then early warning systems, we already have built that in place, so that's not a big thing that we're worried about. And then the last one, again, unfunded mandate that says you can use your type 20 vehicle. So you'll see we have small little vans or buses outside here. That's a type 20. But if you're gonna allow me to use that for attendance, that means I'm gonna need one type 20 full-time doing that, and I'm gonna need a person doing that. So there's a fiscal impact. So again, we've said to them, if you're gonna go with this type 20, there's still fiscal impact in districts. That's another unfunded mandate that you better put a price tag to. So we're working on that. And then the last two, or Julie, summer school funding is there. We continue to say to them, you need to pass that before April 1st. We are aware that the governor has $100 million in her line item, but again, as we try and plan for summer school, we are doing this without a budget. We're gonna still do it because we know at some point we'll get money, but we range our summer school between 300 and 700,000 because that's at times what we're getting.
30,000.
30,000. So again, I think there'll be some funding that will come from that. And then there is still the literacy investment. So we have a literacy investment account. That's what pays for our TOSAs right now. I think one of the biggest issues we're seeing, the current 23 through 25 biennium really was focused on K3, but we could use some of that funding for 4-5. There's a little bit of push that says for 25, 27, you can only use it for K3. Now my response is 4 and 5 still have intervention needs. So why are we not allowing those pieces of tutoring and coaching to be in 4 and 5 and only K3? So again, I think that's some of the pieces there. So any questions about just where we are from a state, that's just state, and then I'll give you a quick update on federal. Other questions about that? Anything about that? Again, we're in a marathon, not a sprint. We're at 11.36, and then we'll continue to talk with you all about what we're seeing and what the budget may end up as. So federal, just real quickly, we're still hearing the potential that title funds in some form or fashion will get cut back. What I'm gonna say federally, it's a little bit chaotic right now. So we're just staying in regards to what's going on statewide and what we can control. what Julie and I are working on, because Julie really does work with me and our teams to develop the title funding with our departments and the schools, because that's anything from Title I, which is tied to our high poverty schools, all the way to Title II, which is professional learning. Again, as I shared, we think we're being told at this moment by our federal lobbyists that there's probably going to be a cut between 1% and 5%. We are going to, and I've told you this before, I tend to be conservative when it comes to budgeting. We are going to budget a 5% loss in our title funds. It's better for us to be on that side, and then I come back to you and say, hey, by the way, and we're gonna be able to add this back in. So we are gonna go a little bit more conservative when we do come to the budget committee with some of the, what I call the additional funding that we, outside of the state school fund that we present to you. So we will have that funding be 5% less than what it is currently this year from that perspective. The only other thing I would say is that the potentially where the state would start to pay attention to the federal, right now the state, they're dealing with the state money. They do not really have any care about what's going on at the federal level, but I do think if there is a massive cut of Medicaid, there will be a little bit more voice at the state level. We do get some Medicaid funding, but there is more in other health areas of our state where that would be more impactful from that. Lastly, last night, actually, was it yesterday? It was yesterday. So yesterday, Senator Merkley was in town. He comes in and does his town hall, very well attended within the community. It was over in Dallas. But at 11:30, we had an opportunity. There were leaders across Polk County that we had an opportunity to talk with him just as leadership in our community. Really, really well attended by the leaders in West Salem, Dallas, obviously Independence and Monmouth, everyone being there. I shared again about title funding and IDEA, which is the Individual Disabilities Education Act, just trying to say we need to fully fund that. And then the other piece I shared was we had originally heard, because Matt and I are moving forward with E-rate. So we finished with category 1. We're reviewing those contracts and are going to be able to start that. We just turned in category 2, which is really the rebuilding of the entire internet infrastructure. So we hopefully will have that funding by the end of the school year going into the summer. That's the goal, and be able to start those projects. But we're hearing all of a sudden that the E-rate could be cut. So originally that was not part of, they were leaving the FCC alone. Now there's some discussion that may also have some cuts. So we are spending, what we have in our E-rates, we are trying to buy now because we don't know that it will be there from that perspective. So again, those are still moving parts. Every day it changes a little bit. So like I said, I will continue to update you all in those areas. But really good conversation with him just to get some insight from his perspective. Questions? Okay.
We haven't heard anything about the USDA funding.
No, that we have heard that there is a look at the federal level to reduce SNAP. So yes, that could impact obviously what we are doing. If that happens, then we would, there's potential we're going to have to come back to you all and have a cost. Now, the state is looking at, can they fund, taking the federal government out of it, is there enough to be able to do state funding so kids can have free breakfast and lunch? So that's still a conversation that's taking place at the state level. So like I said, I just want to give you all an update on that. So some good things and some things we're still up in the air, but we're in the beginning stages.
So did that wrap the legislative update?
Yep, that's both budget and legislation. I sort of did it combined.
What's our first budget meeting?
First budget committee meeting will be the end of April. I think it's the last Monday of April. I'm just gonna look here.
April 28th.
April 28th.
When are we going to open up invitations for people to?
So
That's now.
Oh,
And
I
there's-
met someone the other day that wanted to apply. Is
Lovely.
there something on the website or?
On the front page,
Okay.
yeah, so
homepage.
you'll see two things that we've added to the front page. One is the budget committee, and then we have also uploaded I read that correctly the other day, for board positions that would be open.
Yes.
So just to let the community know, we're looking for budget committee members, but we're also, again, anyone that wants to run for the open positions, that process
We
of
need,
how you would do that is on the website.
we need a lot of budget committee members, and so I'm also working on a little story, so hopefully we'll get
That will be
something
shared out to
soon.
the
When you
community.
say a lot, what does that mean?
Like
How many?
7?
Okay.
No, we have 7 board members, so we have 5. Because we have 7 members, we have 7 public. So 2 are filled, so we need 5.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, but if you, I think it's a good beginning process for people that are interested in, and again, there's some really good work happening between Emily and Cease in doing some messaging about budget, and you'll start to see a little bit more of that, especially as we come to the budget meeting, but also just in overall communicating out to the public. You have a question?
Oh, no, I was just trying to figure out if there were times that you had where you wanted us to go after the Capitol. I know March 3rd is a K-12 classified lobby day that they're hosting with
Yeah.
OSBA and AT Oregon.
Yeah, the one I'm waiting for, usually OSBA, and I haven't seen it yet, so in case I missed it, usually OSBA has a day, and I haven't seen that yet, usually by
They
county.
They sent some emails out a few weeks ago about like, are you interested? And I messaged back, so I'm like getting emails, but they haven't
They haven't
actually
really said-
asked.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
haven't set a
know I'm
specific
on
day.
March 11th going as a part of it, because I sit on the Coast Equity Board, so we're going on March 11th. But again, I think there's gonna be other things as we move forward. The other one that I didn't put on here, and I cannot remember off the top of my head what the number is, but there is also a bill tied to work group specifically focusing on K-12 and youth care facilities and our relationships. I used to refer to them as group homes. We don't call them that anymore. They're youth care facilities. And so there is legislation out there to have a work group come together to work through some of those pieces. How do we share data together better? You know, what might that look like? Those types of things. So
When did that happen? I don't remember reading about that.
it's a beginning stage.
Okay.
Representative Evans is one of the people that's on the bill initially. And so I'll add that into the report on Friday, but I just received that
That's
information. So it's, again, beginning stages as well.
Mhm.
But I think that'd be a good thing.
Should we get them?
Mhm.
We've done some good work as a school district.
I'll be there tomorrow with AFL-CIO if y'all want to join me.
So when we going to these things, is it, like going in and observing or speaking or
No,
watching outside?
you know, we can, and I can talk with COSA if we want to set up just a central school district and go talk. Really, it would be focusing on, I would say, the 4 areas that we have listed in our priorities, and really talking to them about the impacts of what this means for us. Again, telling them some student stories and some of the things that we're working through, both positive, but why we need some additional funding in those areas, or why we want to make sure anything that you pass is not an unfunded mandate that can cause this issue. So if you'd like, I can reach out to COSA and say, you know, what as a school district, if we would like to go do this, who do I talk to? Can I just work through them? I could probably work through OSBA as well, if that's something you are
And you
interested
just
in.
go to their offices.
Yeah.
On
And we
this office
strategically
meeting.
figure out who we might want to talk to, maybe more in the area.
Considering in the fall, we talk about, the board, well, we can't all.
Can be everybody, yeah. I can take 3 of you.
But yeah, to go and either offer testimony or at least listen to the discussion and then share thoughts with you.
Yeah, we can.
Didn't we too?
We talked about going,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of times they've done it in the past by county. I've not seen that yet. Doesn't mean that it's not gonna come, but we do have new leadership in both COSA and OSBA, so they could just be doing things a little bit differently, but I can definitely reach out to both of them and say, hey, if we wanted to go do this as a school district, Can we work with you to set that up? Can you help us set that up? Who are the key people that we could go talk to and talk about our messaging? If you'd like me to do that, I will definitely
Yeah, I
follow up
would,
on it.
because one of our big concerns that I recall in that discussion was the incredible cost
Yep.
to the district of our special education program,
Yep.
and our concern with some of the group homes.
Yep, I will follow up with both lobbyists to see if they can help set that up.
Jen, if they don't, I do this all the time for our meeting, we go
Okay,
probably all
So
the
maybe
time,
you and I
just
can-
set up our own
yeah,
appointments, so
you and I can do
I'm
that.
happy to help
Okay.
if you don't have to go through COSA.
Perfect. Okay.
I bug them all the time.
No, that's great. Part of it is, I think, having the conversation with the right legislators, like who is on board, not that they're not going to be, but having conversations to just reaffirm things. But I also think if there are people that may be one way or the other that we can have a conversation with to possibly sway in that direction. They have to make hard decisions, I know that, but I think we do a good, I remind people as a superintendent and really as a board, we work with both sides of the aisle. And so we want to make sure that we're having conversations with both sides of the aisle as we go through this process.
And Jen, if there's some of those bills, if you gave us numbers on, I'm on the OLIS legislative tracker. And so I probably, like every night, just submit testimony on
Yep.
some bill through that. But it's really easy to submit written testimony, and I could track the ones that we're on and just show you all how to do that.
Yep, we could do that.
It helps a lot.
Mhm. Yep. Yep, we can definitely put that into the Friday report. We could start to build that in, if you would like that.
It seems, I read an article that had some of the testimony that was given last week. I think it was last week, on the changing the cap and the high cost. And it was a great article, but all the things that seemed like they were the most effective testimony were very specific stories, not like generally, we can't afford these unfunded mandates. And I feel like teachers and administrators know those specific stories, and we don't know the specific stories as much.
Yep.
So it seems like we need to think about what we can bring
Yeah.
to the table that that would be impactful for them, since we can't talk to a specific student at a specific school, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're working with administrators across the district is what's your 2 or 3 line sentence that could share your story of students or share your story about staff. So we have an ad council meeting tomorrow. I'll add that. We have that as we have legislative update that I do with them, so that we keep them aware. But we have been trying to have them start to have some ideas of what could you share, so we could grab some of those stories if we want to move forward with sort of that testimonial and start to build that bucket list.
Yeah, Susan, I think you do have some personal stories though, because you've been through a situation where you've watched the district have to let go positions
Right.
and things like that. So you, as a board member, have had to make those difficult decisions and be along
Right.
for the ride.
I guess maybe it's just like identifying them and all the stuff that we do is
Right,
kind
and you
of,
heard Orlando talk
Right.
about how those cuts affect students
Yeah,
directly.
that's true.
So, I mean, you do have it in you. It's just a different perspective from.
Maybe I'll pull a meeting with you two and maybe you as well, just to have a conversation of what we want that to look like moving forward. I mean, again, we're only a month in, we got
Yeah,
a long ways to
but
go.
we need
And I'm
But I
happy.
think
impactful
having
things to say.
Yeah.
Even
Well,
though
I'll
we
reach out
might
to
know
the
them
three of you.
somewhere.
But Susan, you hit the nail on the head. Like whenever I go to one of the union trainings on how to lobby, it's always like, here's the bill, what's your personal story, and here are some talking
Yeah.
points. And so they often generate kind of a template for us, and this is what you can submit, or this is what you would say when you go in. And then often when we go to the offices, because you go to their offices as you get your appointments, you get set appointments and you go to their offices. You sort of, if you're a group, we decide, you might start and tee up our conversation. Jan might tell a story, and then I might come in and end it. But you, as a group, end up sort of rehearsing what you're going to say.
The only thing that I tell people all the time is about like how I was so upset we couldn't pay for the math curriculum because we have to spend money on other stuff. That really,
We have to close a school
yeah,
because we don't have enough special ed teachers.
right. That,
If that
yeah.
That is the one that just turns me frosted inside and out. Because if that isn't discrimination, it just,
It's not discrimination because we're unfortunately, and I say this out loud, we are shutting down the whole school, so it's
Right.
unfortunately equitable across the building. Because
I would argue that.
It's
That's fine.
discrimination if that means it injures all the students.
Yeah.
It injures
That's a
all the
nice way of
students,
And
yeah.
I don't disagree with you, Jan.
Oh, I
know
know,
that.
I just, when that bill went in, democracy is collapsing. This,
And then the other thing we could talk about is we could put some one pagers together. So specifically about again, I'm making this up, we could focus on an attendance bill and just put a couple lines and it comes from the whole board.
Mhm.
Right, so there's a couple different ways we could advocate for the next few months. And so if you all are open to that, we'll pull together and then maybe look at, can we find a day here in the next couple months? And then also, what could we share that we feel comfortable in giving those talking points to the board.
I think it'd be powerful for them to see school board members, because we're elected volunteers.
Okay, I'll pull a meeting. Maybe end of this week or early next week. Three of you.
just have to look around where it doesn't matter. I live there. Everybody doesn't even know who I am anymore. Oh, you're off to the school therapy again.
All right, if there's no other topics of discussion or questions, we will adjourn.
Boom. Thank you.
Stop that recording.
Have to get scarves and
Uh-huh.
say.
Let's say unplug.